Vikings look to make it 8 in a row in Seattle, but will the Seahawks bring their best, and can the Vikings handle that? Welcome to Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, 12s and Vikings fans. It's time for another Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We have Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Vikings. I'm Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks. He's Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings. We're going to be diving into this crucial Week 16 contest. Both teams have plenty to play for as the Seahawks and Vikings battle at Lumen Field on Sunday afternoon. This crossover brought your way by our friends over at PrizePicks. Download the app and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Luke, I don't know that there has been a more shocking story than the Minnesota Vikings this season, at least from the positive side of things. I thought when J.J. McCarthy went down that this is probably a 5 or 6 win team. I just didn't look at them as a team that was going to be overly competitive with Sam Darnold at the quarterback position. But Darnold and company, they have proven me wrong. And in fact, right now, if I had to hedge bets on who's going to be hosting or representing the NFC in the Super Bowl, I would very much be strongly considering the Minnesota Vikings. I think Kevin O'Connell has done a phenomenal job. But I want to start off with Sam Darnold because this is a guy who, Geno Smith is a similar story, a guy that had took a couple landing spots, He ends up with the right coaching staff.
Interesting day for the Jets.
Yeah, both of them started with the Jets. It didn't work out. And obviously New York, it just seems like quarterbacks just go there to have their careers fall apart or not be able to take off. But what has been the difference for him to guide this team to 12 wins in their first 14 games and have a chance to win the NFC North?
Yeah, it's so funny. Everybody always says, like, wow, you guys are really the surprise. It's like when you go home for the holidays and everybody's like, whoa, you lost weight. It's like, well, what'd you think of me before that? Huh? It's like weird. Look, the Vikings have surpassed expectations. And I think a lot of that is because the name recognition is a pretty bad predictor. And I fell victim to it too. Sam Darnold, the struggles that he had early, you got to think about why. What was wrong with Sam Darnold? Not just that he sucks. Why does he suck? What is he doing that is bad? And it was turnovers, right? He'd have 5 interceptions on a Monday night game, and we all remember that he was seeing ghosts and all that. And he wouldn't take care of the ball, and it's because he's really greedy. He's a very greedy, overly aggressive quarterback, and I think he's come to a place that hasn't necessarily curbed that. I think they've reeled him in like a little from, the Jets days where it was just completely untenable, but it's more that they have embraced it. And so the Vikings offense is Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson hunting explosives all day long. You slip up, it's 30 yards. They are not the teams that the Vikings have been over the last decade with Kirk Cousins and the Mike Zimmer era that were all about tight execution and methodical 6 plays, 6 yards at a time. No, they want to hit you for 50. And that means that sometimes they are going to go first down, second down, third down, 3rd and 10 punt. But a lot of times that means that, like last week, they converted 3rd and long 4 different times against the Bears, which is a good defense. As discombobulated as they are, that defense is good. 3rd and 17, 3rd and 14, they were converting those because they can find those explosives. And that's Sam Darnold being consistently greedy. He wants that, that clear out that's not really part of the play, but it's a go ball. If that's a one-on-one he likes, he's just taking it. And Kevin O'Connell encourages this. He likes that. He likes the aggression. He wants to be aggressive. He wants to constantly, always foot on the gas. The defense is the same way. But once you take Sam Darnold from, a 4 interception a game kind of quarterback to a 2 interception a game kind of quarterback, the explosives start to do enough to make up for it. And the Vikings offense can be one of the more explosive ones in the league, even though they're not consistent enough. They're probably more of an above average offense while the defense is truly elite. But that's been plenty to win 12 games, and some of them not even really that close.
And one of the things that's been also kind of a pleasant surprise to me, Christian Darrisaw was playing great football before he went down. That's
unbelievable football, insane.
Could have had a major negative domino effect on this offense. Yet they go out and get Cam Robinson, And this offensive line has held up fine. Maybe it's not quite as good as what it was when Darrisaw was playing, but it seems like they have been able to weather the storm on that front, and that's kept them afloat on offense.
It's been, I would say it has declined over the last few weeks, the offensive line. And I don't think that any Vikings fans will get mad at me for saying that. Cam Robinson has been pretty good, and I don't think he's the problem. He's been totally I can't believe the Jaguars let us have this guy. After he's been in their organ for 8 years and they just let him go in the middle of the season, but they're dead anyways. So whatever. But, the communication is obviously weird. He's been here a month. Sometimes he and Blake Brandel, the guard next to him, don't pick up the stunt right or something like that. But really they've also had a switch at right guard in the middle of the season, which has caused its own host of communication things. You got a new guy in there. Dalton Reisner takes over for Ed Ingram. And that was just a benching. That's just, that was an injury. That was just straight up, we're making a switch. Brian O'Neill is now dealing with a knee injury. He had a knee brace for the second half of the Monday night game, now short week. He did participate in practice. I want to say limited, but now he's going to be maybe not 100%. And, the only two stable, consistently there and healthy guys on the line are Garrett Bradbury and Blake Brandel. And you could argue those guys have been the two worst problems. So it's starting to deteriorate, but it's not a line that is disastrous. We've seen disastrous lines in Minnesota where you just can't keep anybody there.
You want to watch a disastrous line, just watch the Seattle.
Well, right. It's still better than I think what you guys are dealing with, but it has gone from, I think, one of the best units in the league to an okay one. But that sucks for the Vikings, who are, everything is a 20-yard route. Everything is kill shot, kill shot, kill shot, kill shot. These things are not 3-step drop and go. So these linemen do have to hold up. So if you got a pass rusher that can win, especially on the inside, you can force the Vikings to either contract their offense in a way that they're uncomfortable with, or you're going to have Sam Darnold running around, where a lot of good things can happen, but a lot of bad things can happen. And that's how I think, teams like the Jaguars put some of the worst Sam Darnold tape out there.
On the defensive side of the ball, as you mentioned, this really feels like this has been what has carried this team to the 12-2 record. Obviously, the offense has surpassed all expectations with a backup quarterback taking over and Sam Darnold playing the way that he has. But on defense, Brian Flores, as the Seahawks like to say with Mike McDonald, when they're rolling, he has been in his bag all year. The guy has just been dialing it up. What is the biggest difference between this defense now and the group that we saw last year in Minnesota?
There are some schematic tweaks that you can see. I actually just wrote an entire almanac on this over at the Wide Left Substack, if you want to check that out. By the way, Seahawks fans know Arif Hassan. He does Wide Left, and there's a whole thing.
He's a celebratory Seahawks fan, as we like.
Yeah, right. He's definitely, he is don't let him deny it, okay? He's a Seahawks fan. But because of this whole thing, he does have something going on over at his Substack right now, supporting the Lavender Rights Project that I think is worth checking out. But I just wrote something over at that Substack with a big, long almanac on Brian Flores' defense. And so there are a few little schematic things, but I think a lot of it is just having the right pieces in the right places. Somebody like Jonathan Grenard or Andrew Van Ginkel, who can cover a little bit more, is used to that more than someone like Danielle Hunter. So Flores can run it the way he wants to run it, rather than having an edge that he can't drop back into coverage. That limits his blitzes and stuff. Everybody's a little bit more built for this. And you're getting career years out of 6 different guys. These are, again, it's name recognition didn't tell you they were going to be good. But Josh Metellus, career year. Jonathan Grenard, arguably career year. Van Ginkel, definitely career year. Somebody like Jerry Tillery just got a game ball, 2 crazy 4th down stops on Monday Night Football. You're like, who did what? This the whole year has been that. And even getting good performances in, I would say, more limited roles. They don't ask as much of the corners as a lot of defenses do, because it's a lot of zone, it's a lot of cloud, it's a lot of just kind of, hit your spot and go trigger down in the flat and make a tackle. But that works for somebody like Stephon Gilmore or, somebody like Shaq Griffin, and where those guys are at in their careers. And so that has worked. By the way, Stephon Gilmore has been practicing. He's probably going to come back this week. So yeah, they've had a lot of the right pieces in the right places, but it's also that in year 2 of this experimental Brian Flores defense, they kind of stress tested everything last year, got extraordinarily exposed and solved. They didn't win a game in all of December. I think they won 1 game December 3rd and they lost out. They lost the last 4 games of the year. And a lot of that is because the weaknesses of that defense were exposed and drilled. And over the offseason, Brian Flores got in the lab, figured out how to paper over those weaknesses. And this is now like a stable thing that other teams are starting to steal from. And that's how you know it's catching on.
It's a copycat league, so if everybody's trying to match you, that's when you know you are doing it right. When we come back here on this latest Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Vikings, we're going to flip the script, and we're going to take a look at the Seahawks, who are still licking their wounds coming out of that tough loss to the Green Bay Packers on Sunday Night Football. Don't go away. You're listening to Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's that time of the year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins on December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into the first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. This episode is also brought your way by Hillsdale College, history, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed the basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, offering more than 40 free, that's right, 40 free online courses, including Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right at hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. You're listening to Crossover Thursday here, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Vikings. I'm Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks. Glad to be teaming up with Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings as we head into this massive Sunday afternoon battle at Lumen Field. Both teams with plenty to play for. The Vikings still have a chance to win the NFC North, maybe even get the number one seed in the NFC. The Seahawks are just trying to get to the postseason, which really the only clear path is to win the NFC West. And right now they are in second place behind the Los Angeles Rams. Luke, this Seahawks team, and I kind of joked about it a little bit earlier here in the show when it really isn't that funny for Seahawks fans, but
come on, it's always funny for Seahawks fans. That's what I love about Seahawks fans.
It's perpetual. It's year in, year out. The offensive line continues to be a struggle for this football team. They've got a few young pieces that they are kind of excited about, but they have played, I believe, 7 different starting combinations on the offensive line this year. There's been very
That's
little
my
continuity.
first. Yeah, my first question was about the trenches because I thought I always thought of the Seahawks as a pretty physical team, and then what happened to them against Green Bay on Sunday Night Football was, just getting pushed around. And that made it so, and then Geno Smith gets hurt. Sounds like he's going to play, but I still feel like the primary issue is up front, both sides of the ball. So, I guess what is the physicality of this team? Because now, I'm not very familiar with the Seahawks at all. So is that just wrong?
Well, it's been funny because Arizona gave Minnesota a really good game a couple weeks ago. Arizona's a physical football team.
Really physical, yeah.
And Seattle ran for 170 yards against them 2 weeks ago. This is an offensive line that was starting to look like he was gelling. And I don't want to continue to pile on the guy, but I think that Ryan Grubb has been one of the big problems. And I think he is a capable play caller, but he hasn't made the adjustments that he needs to. He still thinks he's coaching UW's offensive line last year, which was probably the best offensive line in college football last season.
Yeah, 2 guys drafted,
he's
right?
still coaching that kind of a line. And look, the reality is you're not. This is not close to being one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. You can't run all these long developing routes. You are putting Geno Smith in an awful position. And sometimes he's trying to force it in the red zone. He's thrown 4 red zone picks. I would argue 3 of them happened because either the play design was not good or he's getting smashed because this line can't protect on those long routes. And the unwillingness to run the football. This last game, what drove me nuts, Luke, is they got within 10 points on a Zach Charbonnet touchdown run. They were averaging over 5 yards per carry at that point. And there was 10 minutes left when they got the ball back after 3 and out, and they didn't run the ball the rest of the game. They were like, Sam Howell behind this offensive line, we're just going to have you throw it every single time. He threw 12 straight passes after he came into the game. None of that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
So
was he just chasing the game though, or was it still like pretty neutral?
Well, it was a 17-point game when he came in, but
Yeah,
my
I
argument is that when you put a backup quarterback like Sam Howell already takes a lot of sacks, you put him in the lineup and then you say, you know what? Yeah, there's 30 minutes left to play, but we're not gonna run the ball anymore. You're literally allowing the other team to just tee off on him, and that's what happened. And when they finally ran the ball a couple times, they got some big chunk plays, and then those were cool, but let's not do it anymore. And they just completely shut up their playbook, and that has happened so many times this year, where Ryan Grubb just wants to go shotgun, let's pass 80% of the time, and that ain't going to work, especially behind that offensive line. So I think that you've had a clash of personnel with what the offensive coordinator wants to do when he probably isn't going to be able to do what he wants to do in the NFL without making some adjustments.
So I guess that leads me to one of the two questions I always ask in these crossovers, and that is, what do the Seahawks want to do when they see a blitz? Because obviously it's Brian Flores. You're going to see a ton of that, or at least a ton of threats against the blitz. You got Geno Smith not 100%, so I'm sure it's going to be extra important to try to keep him upright and not getting hit all game long. But is this a we want to get the ball out quick kind of offense? Is this a we want our guy to run around kind of offense that now has to adapt to that? Is this a we're just going to put in extra blockers kind of offense? Like, what is their primary answer when they walk into a game and they know they're going to get blitzed a whole bunch?
I wish I could give you an answer to that, but the problem is I'm still trying to answer that because they have played teams that have blitzed. I mean, and here's the thing. Geno Smith was pretty darn good against the blitz 2 years ago. Last year, he took a little bit of a step back, but I think a lot of it was the offensive line. I can keep bringing that up. The communication was not there. This year, they have not emphasized the quick passing game the way that I thought they were going to because Ryan Grubb has just kind of been hitting his head against a wall like, we got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jack Smith, and Jigbo. We got to take our shots. And yeah, you want to take some shot plays, but you got to have something to set that up. You've been unwilling or unable to run the football. So teams don't respect that. And you're not getting rid of the football quickly. I mean, they had 2 third downs the other day against Green Bay, Luke, that were 3rd and 4 and 3rd and 2 that both plays, Geno was given literally one outlet that was just past the line of scrimmage or past the yard to gain. All the other guys were still running their routes downfield when he got sacked.
Contracts.
So they're not doing what they need to do. There have been a few games where they have ran more quick structured stuff, and it has worked against the blitz because Geno can get the ball out. But I wish I could give you a direct answer there. I feel like Ryan Grubb's still trying to figure that out. And the offense trying to figure out what are we good at. It's week 16 and you're still wondering with consistency, like, what are we good at? Because it has been such an up and down season on that side of the ball.
Yeah, it's so I'm just thinking about the last game I saw with the Vikings. It was Monday night. Caleb Williams' average depth of target completely just plummets. And so I wonder if that's the same thing that happens where the Seahawks go, look, we're not going to make Geno Smith run around. We don't want him to get hit a whole bunch. We'll try to throw this to, Smith and Jigba, Lockett behind the line of scrimmage, Kenneth Walker behind the line of scrimmage, and see if they can't make some of these corners miss. And that's kind of their favorite go-to plan. But on the other side of the ball, so if the blitzing is the big threat from the defense, obviously the big threat from the offense is Justin Jefferson. And while the Vikings have had, great performances all year from Addison, from TJ Hawkinson and Aaron Jones, it's still JJ's offense. So when you see a team that has a clear defined number one threat, that has the guy that if you let this guy go off, it's a big deal. What do the Seahawks like to try to do about that?
Well, most of this season, they have tried to avoid bracketing top receivers. And look, when Reek Woolen's playing like he's capable of, last week was maybe the worst I've ever seen him play. But when Reek Woolen is playing like he's capable of, he can defend anybody because of his size and athleticism and his ball skills. Devin Witherspoon is capable of playing outside in the slot. Josh
That's a good secondary, man.
They've got some really good corners.
Yeah.
So I think Mike McDonald has been pretty confident with, hey, I'm going to mix and match what I'm going to do with my safeties. And we aren't necessarily going to be bracketing over the top. But there have been games, the Jets game, for example, Devontae Adams was giving them some problems. So Julian Love started to bracket on him. And then suddenly the Jets couldn't do anything on offense. So there have been games that they have done that. I don't know if that's going to be the strategy coming in against Justin Jefferson right out of the gate. If I'm running the defense, it is, because I think Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in the NFL. And as good as Jordan Addison is and some of the other targets they've got, I'm trying to force Sam Darnold to have to beat me with those targets because I trust my other corners. I think I have enough talent at that position to do it, but I don't know if that's how Mike McDonald's going to handle it, because most of this year he has been very hesitant to do that. And he likes to put his corners, because he trusts them, in a one-on-one position. And he likes to mix his safeties and his slot corner, Devin Witherspoon, in with their blitz packages and sim pressures, which is tougher to do if you are mixing in bracket coverages or you're finding different ways to try to double up, so to speak, on a star receiver. So I think it does handicap some of the things that he likes to do.
You know, it's interesting. There are a couple of teams that have essentially taken the approach that you talk about, maybe the Seahawks being a little bit more favorable than you personally are, which is, look, Justin's going to get his. We're just going to kind of accept that he's going to get a lot of yards, and let's make them one-dimensional. That's what Aaron Glenn said about the Vikings. Sure, they can go through Justin Jefferson all day. That'll make them one-dimensional. We stop everything else and they're a one-dimensional offense. We can work with that. And they won that game. And they've beaten the Vikings 4 times in a row doing that over the last couple of years. So there is merit to that, as crazy as it sounds to be like, let's just let Justin go off. There is merit to that. But a lot of other teams have decided, in various ways to double Justin Jefferson, or to, use other coverage resources, or sometimes they have a guy they think they can trust against him. I think the only ones that really did it without a lot of help over the top, were the Jets. And that's, DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner. That's a pretty good duo. So I wonder if the Seahawks think that they can do what the Jets did, or if they are going to have to kind of go schematically. But that might be one of the keys to this game. That might be one of the really important decisions that the Seahawks have to make.
It's a perfect segue into our last segment here, because we're going to talk keys to victory, and then we're going to discuss some predictions against the spread. We'll be getting to that up next here on our crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Vikings. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. You can bet on everything from Geno Smith and Sam Darnold combining to score 5 or more touchdowns on Sunday afternoon, or DK Metcalf being the first skill player to find the end zone at Lumen Field. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. You make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Vikings. I'm Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks. He's Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings. It is time to get to our keys to victory. And obviously, the Vikings have been very successful at winning football games this year, Luke, winning 12 of their first 14. Very good position to win the NFC North, especially since the Detroit Lions have turned into a real-life MASH unit at this point. It feels like this is for the taking for the Vikings. Still a huge game to make that happen for Minnesota, though, in Seattle. From your perspective, what are the keys to victory for the Vikings to come in, maybe match some of the things that Green Bay did, but where are some areas that you think they absolutely have to hit to beat this Seahawks team playing in the Pacific Northwest?
I'm going to sound like such a boomer. I'm going to sound like so boring here, but it's got to start up front, and physicality in the trenches. Seeing that Green Bay game, that's my understanding, is let's push them around. Can we push them around? But like I kind of mentioned before, can the Vikings push them around? They've gotten themselves pushed around a little bit by Arizona, by even, units like a lot of backups in Los Angeles pushed them around a little bit. Atlanta pushed them around a little bit. They're kind of not supposed to be able to do that. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think that's like an X factor for me is who gets the physical push. Who really can beat each other up. But one thing the Vikings have done all year long, and in every single game they've won, and even the 2 that they've lost, you've been playing Vikings football, not the other guy's football. You've been playing football predicated on explosives. You have been in, let's make this game decided on how good you are at beating the blitz. The Lions were great at beating the blitz, and they won. But it has to be down to that. And, they have not been, they didn't that game wasn't a Lions game as much as it was a Vikings game. And the Lions went in to US Bank Stadium, played Vikings football and won. Congrats to them. That's a heck of a feat. And I think LA kind of did something similar. I will say the Vikings historically very bad on the West Coast at weird times. That travel, the Pacific time zone change, I think is a genuinely important home field advantage. I'm sure you guys are used to hearing that, but the Vikings haven't won in Seattle since 2006. So they're like that Chester Taylor was the last. Remember the Chester Taylor game? That was the last time they won in Seattle.
Unfortunately, I remember that game really well.
Yeah, almost 20 years ago, that one. It's been that long. And otherwise, it's been a whole bunch of weird primetime games and Action Green and Laquan Treadwell busted coverages and sort of a bunch of weird stuff. The more normal this game can be, the more it's just about finding, 15-yard chunks and like the better things go for the Vikings. But for the Seahawks to take this, they have to prevent the Vikings from making it a Vikings game. They have to, no, we're not going to do this blitz thing, right? You have to like find a way to dissuade that blitz. But yeah, that's asking Brian Flores to be a normal person, and that ain't going to happen.
Yeah, from Seattle's perspective on defense, I'm basing this off of watching a ton of Sam Darnold over the years, and I feel like even this season, as well as he has played, when opponents have been able to create interior pressure up front, that is where the interceptions and the bad decisions are coming from Sam Darnold. And I look at Seattle's front. You mentioned the physicality for one quarter, and that ended up being a huge difference. I don't know what happened to Seattle in that first quarter. That was not the Seahawks defense I'd seen the last 4 weeks. They held Josh Jacobs to 21 rushing yards in the last 2 quarters, though. That is the defense that I have been watching.
So they found it.
They found it. Leonard Williams is having an all-pro season. The dude has been absolutely unblockable at times. And even in that game against Green Bay, he had 4 tackles netting 1 or fewer yards in the second half by himself. He's got 7 sacks. If he can create problems for that interior line that, as you mentioned, is having a harder time keeping Sam Darnold clean as of late, if Leonard Williams can create pressure, and Jaron Reed has had a good season, hasn't had the sack numbers, but he's been effective. Byron Murphy, second, is starting to play better. To me, that is the biggest key, is if they can get pressure on Sam Darnold with their interior pass rush, that takes away some of those explosives because your pocket is collapsing down on you, and those long developing routes can't get open. So I think that is going to be key. And on offense, you mentioned being boring. Look, my listeners at this point are probably like, dude, stop saying it. It's not going to happen, but run the damn football. I am so tired of watching this team week in, week out. If 1 or 2 runs don't work, you know what? We're just going to turn into an air raid offense. Throw it.
Vikings have, by EPA per play, the best run defense in the league right now.
But I think Seattle cannot come into this game and say, we're just going to sling it all over the place. Especially
you're going to have to. Like, they do stop the run. You're going to have to eat a 2-yard run and say we're sticking with it if you're going to stick with it.
You've got to continue running the football. And look, like I said, they ran for 170-plus yards. Arizona's run defense was the number 1 run defense in the previous 5 games when they did that. That is a physical football team, and they were pushing them around. You've got to play some bully ball in Seattle. And I think that the offensive line has shown in flashes recently they can do that, but the offensive coordinator's got to let those guys lather up, and he has not been willing to do that. So those are the 2 big keys to me. Interior pressure on Sam Darnold. I think if they do that, it really takes away a lot of the things the Vikings like to do, and it can really stir up some panic from Sam Darnold, even at this stage of his career. He still will throw some picks and make some throws that are gambles because he's a risk taker. And you have a opportunistic secondary, and I think they have to run the ball. I'm not saying they need to run for 170 yards, but they have to run the football and stick with it and get some play action opportunities to take some pressure off Geno, because he's not going to be 100% either. You've got to have your run game going so that you can get some of that passing game going that Seattle should be able to do when they have not consistently been able to get going this year, because I think Ryan Grubb has not helped them by simply saying, hey, you know what, run game is optional. I don't care. You can't do that in this football game.
So 2 pass happy teams. The Vikings do that too. I mean, they will go an entire quarter and run the ball twice. And that's not like not sticking with it. The run game will be working plenty well. And Kevin O'Connell just gets into 7-on-7 mode and is just like, but what if we tried to throw a touchdown 3 times? Let's do that. And then sometimes they do throw a touchdown 3 times. And it's like, okay, well, I can't argue with you now. But
Seattle hasn't had that success. So
yeah, I mean, that's, I think, a huge difference. And that's why, Seattle's looking at a wild card and the Vikings are currently trying to play for the 1 seed, although they might both end up in a wild card if we're looking at that. But over under for this game at FanDuel is 43.5. Two pass happy teams, over under 43.5. Kind of like that over, yeah?
You would think, but Seattle has played so many games that have been higher than that on over under, and then it's gone way under. And the defense has played really well, other than the first quarter last week. They have been dominant. Right. I mean, the 4 games before that, they gave up 13.7 points per game, and they scored 2 touchdowns on defense. I mean, this has been a unit that's not only been stopping people, they've been scoring points themselves. The Seahawks have scored more than 20 points in one of their last 5 games with their offense, though. And with the weapons they have, the quarterback they have, again, I have to keep pointing to the play caller, because it's like at some point you got to say, you got to be able to help your offensive line. And I think he's done the exact opposite. Ryan Grubb has got to show that he is willing to make adaptations. And the talent is there that this offense can put points on the board. We just haven't seen it happen this year. It just hasn't come together. So is this the game that it does? I don't know that I'm optimistic necessarily about that, but they're going to have to score some points because Minnesota's going to score points. I would go slightly over on that, but I think that the defense for the Seahawks is going to be kind of ticked off after last week, the way that first quarter went. Wouldn't be shocked if the weather comes into play too.
3-point spread right now. Vikings favored by 3 on the road. That was more when it looked like Geno was maybe not going to play, but with Geno Smith practicing in full, probably he's coming in, and that line comes down a little bit to -3. If Vikings fans know, you don't want to take my gambling advice. Okay, so I'm going to sit this one out, but I'll say it comes down to explosive plays and physicality, which is pretty boilerplate. But I would say that whoever wins up front is going to have that nice ability, keep their QB clean, start pushing the ball down the field, and eventually even good corners mess up.
If Seattle runs the football, and I know this is so generic, but if Seattle runs more than 35% of the time in this game, and they are able to at least have a little bit of success doing that, and they can create
Ben Baldwin just felt a disturbance in the force.
Yeah. They've got to play with that physicality you mentioned on both sides of the ball, creating pressure with their D-line, and they've got to have some semblance of a run game. If they can do those two things, I think that they can cover this, but they have been so bad at home most of this year. That has been the weird thing about this team. They have been phenomenal on the road. They have looked like a team that want to play in the playoffs. They come back to Lumen, and I don't know if they need to start taking them on a bus from their practice facility to make it feel like
get them up in a plane and circle a couple times. And
yeah, they are playing so flat to begin games at home, and then that leads to the Packers fans last week screaming, "Go Pack, go!" because the Seahawks fans are like, "We're getting our butts kicked. Like, this isn't fun." They have taken the crowd out of it, and that's a huge advantage for this team. So they've got to be able to start faster. I don't know what the solution is to that. There's a lot of things that have to happen because I think Minnesota is the better team. If Seattle plays at their best, I certainly can see them winning this one, but there have to be some significant things go their way for me to not say the Vikings are going to cover that just because of what I've seen. I guess we'll find out on Sunday, though, because the Seahawks have been as unpredictable as any team in the league. We don't know what we're going to see. Maybe we see the team that won 4 games in a row and they make this really interesting. Or we see the team from last weekend and Minnesota is just laughing their way to a blowout win. I guess we'll find out when we get there on Sunday.
Absolutely.
As always, a special thanks to all the 12s and Vikings fans out there. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow him, Luke Braun, at Luke Braun NFL. Make sure to tune in tomorrow, Blue Friday on Locked On Seahawks. Vikings also have their show. Make sure to tune those in as we continue to break down this upcoming Week 16 matchup. Thanks for listening in. Go Hawks, go Vikings.